What confession did your parents reveal just before they passed away? Not my parents but grandparents. My grandpa comes from an old-school tough family where mental and physical abuse were rampant. I don't mean the Adrian Peterson switching kind of physical abuse, I mean the kind where you beat the shit out of your son with a tire iron and lock him in a frozen barn overnight and leave him for dead. Anyhow, my gramps was on his deathbed and told my mom her aunt, my great-aunt, was originally a set of twins. When my great-grandma was pregnant, they weren't expecting twins. My great-grandpa's solution was to kill one of the babies by smashing its head against the side of a wash basin. They were poor, backwoods hicks and food was hard to come by, so the best solution, in his mind, was murder. Unfortunately, that really wasn't uncommon up until 150-ish years ago. Still happens in less developed parts of the world. My mother is still alive but her mind has already begun to degrade beyond the ability to manage her lifetime's worth of lies, and they are spilling out at almost the same rate as her lucidity. Roughly 4 months ago she told me that my father never really beat her, but instead, she lied to me in the courts when I was a baby, saying he was violent and abusive so she could save me because he didn't share her religion and she feared he would turn me away from God. She obtained a restraining order and no contact order under the lies he beat me, and her, while he was in another state caring for his mother who was in the process of dying. When he came back home he was locked out and served papers. I hadn't seen him since I was 18 months old. I found him living 2 hours away, told him who I was and he cried and welcomed me into his family. I have a wonderful half-sister and a super chill and kind stepmom. But I lost 34 years with them. A couple of years ago Grandpa was nearing the end, he was mostly blind, had dementia and spent most days asleep. One day he wakes up while my mom is out of the room. Despite being mostly blind he sees me at his bedside and calls me by my mom's name. Not wanting to confuse him, I play along. He proceeds to tell me a secret he's held onto for 40 years. When my mother was little, she was best friends with a boy. This boy eventually grew up, moved away and became a member of what is essentially now the cartel. Through his connections, my grandpa heard this boy planned on returning home and stealing my mother away, either voluntarily or not. Not wanting his daughter to be taken away to most likely be raped and murdered, he begged a rich landowner nearby for help. Grandpa had done a lot of manual labor for the landowner for almost nothing so he was compelled to help. They arranged for the landowner's son, my father, to court my mom, marry her, and take her away to the US. Mom never knew about any of this and by the time the cartel guy came by to take her away, she'd already been across the border for months. I've never mentioned this conversation to either of my parents, who have been married for nearly 40 years. This entire story could simply be the ramblings of a man near his death, riddled with dementia, or it could be the truth. Some things in his stories do match up with small things my parents have mentioned over the years. Either way, I have no plans to find out for sure. When my dad's Alzheimer's was very advanced he once asked me if his dad was still alive. When I gently told him no, his response was good. I hate that man. He used to beat me until I bled. My mom and I don't know if it was the disease talking or a repressed memory that snuck back up as they were married for 30 years and he had never mentioned abuse before. That shit is so horrible to hear. It reminds me of my abuela. Apparently my grandpa used to cheat on her and not come home for days. She kept on asking my aunt about him, and if he had called, she assumed his absence was because he's out cheating on her. He died in 1997. Oh how heartbreaking. My dad would also ask about his brother that passed 25 years before. Then he would say things like he wish I would have treated him better, I wasn't very nice to him growing up. It's so hard to hear these things and wish you could take away the pain they are feeling. That he did have a will. Tragically, the last few days he was so out of that he thought the Vulcans were invading, so that was the last reveal. He wrote it 20 years ago and it wasn't even legally binding, so that sounded more like him. The real reveal happened after he died, told to me by my mom. Dad had always been homophobic, but had started improving the last few years of his life. Mom had been sitting on the reason for all these years, and knowing it makes some of his overprotective behavior make sense. He was molested by an older male relative, who was 6 years older, when my dad was 10. This was the 50s, so nothing was done, and now my mom and I have no clue who all knows, and who all kept it a secret. It colored how he parented me, especially as the youngest. He wouldn't let our oldest brother be alone with us until we could speak, just in case. Our oldest brother is an awesome person, so I always thought it was weird that Dad was so untrusting. He wouldn't let me go for a walk when he lived in the city, because he was worried about me getting kidnapped. He gave me the sex talk at a very young age, like 5 or 6. Mom thinks he was trying to outparent her, but now I'm thinking otherwise. I think it was so that, if someone hurt me, I would have the words to describe it and reach out for help. This ended up longer than I intended, but I guess it's one of those things that has been on my mind. More of a post-death reveal for my father than me, but when my dad was 40 his uncle passed away. Another uncle who had been given very little in the will started spitting out all the dirty little secrets, including that both my dad and his older brother were adopted. Took my dad 20 years to come to terms with it and search for his family. Found some siblings on his maternal side, but only one brother had known Dad existed and spent most of his adult life trying to find Dad. That brother died 2 weeks before Dad sent him a Facebook message reaching out. Please like and subscribe for more stories from askreddit.